Hi guys, I just want to tackle verbs, verbos. I'm taking this from a Spanish 1 perspective, so just really the basics of the AR, ER, and IR verbs. So, as you know, a verb is an action word. So in English, no verb, the sentence is not strictly speaking a correct sentence. There is always an action word that is part of a correct sentence. So I am going, you have the going, or I am seen. Really, I am is the verb to be. It's the same in Spanish. In English, verbs are always expressed generally with the word to and then something. To eat, to speak, to run. That form of the verb, not I run, not you run, but just to run. When a verb is in that general form, we call it the infinitive. The infinitive form. If you're in one of my classes, you will have already heard me beat to death this concept of the verb being in infinity, as it were. And that's what it's referring to. It doesn't have a person like I or you, and it doesn't have a time zone or a tense like the present or the past. It's simply floating out there in infinity. Then, when we take it out of infinity, out of the sky, as it were, and we put it into a person, like I, and we put it into a tense, like now, the present, we are doing what? We are conjugating. Conjugating a verb, and we are taking it out of infinity and making it finite. And so you will hear people in linguistics refer to a verb in the finite form. In other words, it's been conjugated and it is in a person. I, you, he, she, okay? But before we do that, it's floating out here in infinity, and we call that the infinitive form. Okay, moving on. In Spanish, verbs in the infinitive form don't have two words like we do, to something. The to is kind of contained in the word, and all verbs in Spanish fall into three categories. They all end in AR, or they end in IR, or they end in ER. So we'll just say here we got our three kinds of verbs, and that's why you'll always hear AR, ER, IR. What that basically means is, don't be confused by it, people are just referring to verbs, but they're saying, does this verb end in AR, ER, or IR? Why does that matter? Well, because if it's an AR verb, there are certain endings for that verb. And if you learn the endings, you will know when you see an AR verb, you will know the endings. ER, you will know the endings. IR, same again. That's why people are often talking about these endings. So let me give you the endings, and then I'll give you an example, and you will have the basic understanding of verbs in the present tense. In other words, now. I'm not talking about the future, past, just now. I go. I eat. I run. Not the past, I ran, or I ate, those are different endings. But in the present, you will know the endings. This is how we do it. The endings for an AR verb are simply, when you talk about I, the word will end in O. You, it will end in AS. He or she or you polite, it will end in A. We, it will end in amos. You plural, when you're talking about y'all in Spain, they use the vosotros, and it ends in A accent, IS. And then they category, AN. Okay? Now, I'll talk a little bit more about, again, these 6 persons, which really are I, you, he or she, or you polite, we, you plural, and they. I'll cut another small video on what we call the persons or the subject pronouns specifically. But these are the categories that we always conjugate verbs into. These are the endings of an AR verb. Let me show you the endings of a verb ending in ER. They will simply be O, es, e, hemos, es, en. Okay? And swiftly, IR. O, es, e, hemos. Is with an accent. En. Just note one thing. In the AR verbs, on this person, you got the accent on the A. On the ER verbs, accent on the E. IR verbs, accent on the I. Okay? Those are the endings. Now, that's a lot of data. Let me just give you a quick example of what I'm talking about here, and then we'll call this video a wrap. Okay? We'll keep the people here, the persons. But supposing your teacher says to you, here is an AR verb that means to speak. Okay, which, let me even get rid of all this stuff here. An AR verb means to speak, hablar. Okay? Hablar, to speak. It's an AR verb. You just learned the endings. Your teacher says, how do you say I speak? You speak. He, she speaks. In other words, how do you conjugate this verb into the present tense? I speak, you speak. Now your teacher, when they say conjugate, they're wanting you to take this verb in the infinitive, which simply is to something, to speak, and they want you to put them in these 6 categories, these 6 persons that are here, okay? This is what you would do for AR. I, which means, or in Spanish is yo, and then you take off the AR, and you have your ending O for that first person. Yo hablo. You've taken off the AR, and you've put the O for the I. Yo hablo. I speak. Tú hablas. You speak. You remember these endings we just looked at. Él, which means he, or ella, means she, or usted, for you polite. Habla. A was the ending. We, which is nosotros. Remember the ending? Amos. You've taken off the AR and you're replacing it with these endings. Right here. That process is what we mean by conjugating and getting it into the right tense. Vosotros habláis. right there. And then ellos, they, ellos, ellas, or ustedes, ustedes, hablan, an. So there you've just conjugated a verb into the present tense because you knew the endings for AR and you put them into the right. You took off the AR, and for the present tense, you replaced it, that area, this is called the stem, with these endings. Okay? So, very quickly, because we're filling this out, with the endings we learned for ER, IR, supposing your teacher said comer, it's a verb. It means to eat. It's an ER verb. Your teacher wants you to conjugate it into the present. You know the ER endings we just looked at, rewind the video, and you simply knock off the ER, use the stem, and conjugate. Yo como, tú comes, él, ella come, nosotros comemos, vosotros coméis, ellos, ellas comen. Boom. You've just done an ER verb. I eat, you eat, he, she, you polite eat, we eat, you plural eat, in Spain, vosotros, they eat. Okay? Lastly, last 30 seconds here, your teacher gives you an IR verb. Vivir, to live. Please conjugate this in the present. You know the IR endings. You knock off the IR. You keep your persons, your subject pronouns are all the same. And you conjugate. Yo vivo. Vive. See, we're keeping the vive. But you're putting the right endings for IR. Vive. Vivimos. Vivís. Viven. Okay? There's been a lot there. Watch the video again and again until you start to really see the pattern of these endings, what conjugation means, and how to do it. I will upload a sheet here as well with like a one-page sheet with a quick little brief summary of these endings and maybe 10 or 12 verbs for you to practice conjugating. And watch the video, have it up on your screen, and practice. Okay? Keep up the good work.